All right, before we get started with the second section, there's a couple things that I forgot to tell you about from the first section. One of them is I had these unexpected events that I just every day or every other day would bring up, and depending on how, if I thought the teams were prepared and should be prepared with the information, each team would have to figure out how they would handle it. They would have to show me that they were prepared, that they had learned the information, and depending on their level of preparation would depend on whether they gained points or stayed even or lost points. And so, and points was actually turned into a dollar figure when they actually started gaining salary. Another thing that I did, I strategically used social capital. So in the first unit, each student had to do their own documents. They had to do their own part, learn all that information for themselves. And so even though they may have learned it and they passed the panel as a team and they had shared and done their part, if they didn't have their documents turned in, they couldn't move on to the next phase. So they were stuck at their parents' house, and their parents were charging them $1,000 premium per class, which is, each class is a monthly salary, and their team was going to have to pay it. So their team quickly gets on them to get their documents finished up and checks up with them to make sure they're getting it done. And they realize the importance of carrying their weight in the team. So let's go on to this one, living on less. So now they all have jobs. They didn't think about the location of those jobs and how they were going to get everybody there, but this is where the rubber meets the road, and they really have to start figuring some things out. A lot of work is done, a lot of things that a lot of questions that they ask. So I introduced all these documents, and then they work on it, and I just go around every day and help them with the things that they've missed or they have forgotten or misunderstood. So the first one is finding a place to live. They're going to look for places to rent and places to buy. They're going to compare the cost of those. They have to figure all these things out. This is where some of the creativity comes in. I had a student who connected with her dad, and she had these really cool camp pads that she was sure that they were on sale for $123, and they could get those instead of mattresses. And so they have to, anyway, they do the pros and cons of those. They actually have to go looking for some, and they give me some links on Zillow or KSL or Rentler, places where they could live. They're going to put the links and property image in the details, and then they select over here which one they actually plan to live in as a team. And then they have to go over credit reports and credit scores, and decide what their stance is on that and what they're going to do as a team to build, if they're going to build a credit, how they're going to do things. And that's kind of the backbone of this. We spend a lot of time talking about credit score, and do you need a credit score? Is it really good? Can you buy a house? Can you do things without credit? So that's a fun discussion. And then to kind of break things up a little bit, in the middle of all this learning and figuring out they have to do, I do an escape room. This is one of my favorite escape rooms. And so this is kind of the key for it. I have these tags that I print off, and I cut across here, and I separate the name of the appliance with all the information from it, and then I hide these all over the place. So there's this little piece, and then the big piece down below. They're hidden everywhere. And then I take a black light pen, and I circle certain numbers, and that's up in the table above as to which numbers I circle. They find those little papers, and then they also find these papers, and each picture has 3 appliances in it, so they figure out for themselves which tags go with which room. On the back of this picture has a certain color. That color ties to a lock on a box, and so they figure out they have to find the black light pen, and they realize that there's some numbers circled, and there happens to be 4 of the 3 appliances in here. There's 4 numbers circled. 2 of them are together side by side, so that they really only have to do, there's not as many combinations for them to figure out with just 3 options. So then they figure out they have to figure out all these things together, weighing out, what appliance would be used 365 days out of the year, and just part of a day, and not be very much wattage. They have to come up with all those and figure out which ones they are. And they really get pretty good at this. It's kind of fun. So as a debrief, they have to fill out this document, which appliances are used daily, which ones cost the most energy, and then their plan for reducing costs, so that now that they're going to be paying for those things, how are they going to keep their costs low? Then they're going to have to explain financial fitness, what that means, and their group's plan to be financially fit. So as they build their budget and figure out their costs, they're together as a team in terms of what they're going to do to achieve that. So this is transportation. They evaluate all the options, the pros and cons, all the costs, and then they have to have their group plan that goes into this level, this tab, and what it's going to cost them. This is where a lot of more creativity comes in, where they're going to figure out how are they going to get their whole team to work. Some students asked if they could use their own car. I drew the line where if it was a car that they had purchased themselves, and then they could use that car and they didn't have to get one. But if it was just their parents' car, they couldn't use it without buying their parents' car. So they had to purchase it as if it was a real scenario. I had a team of boys who decided they found a tandem bike, a 6-person tandem bike, and they decided that they were going to bike to work. And then, so they had to, so part of my job as their coach was to ask them if they had Google mapped it and figured out how long it would take them to bicycle to all their jobs, and how early in the morning they would have to leave to get everybody to work, and how long it would take to get everybody home. So they had to figure out all those kinds of things, and how would they handle the winter time. And they found a tandem bike with big dually tires that they felt would handle the winter time. Anyway, so we just talked about real life. What would that take? Public transportation. They had to figure out all the buses and everything they would have to take together. They had to come up with that plan. Then they had to do risk management, and that was coming up with thinking about all the risks. And each team member had to learn about different risks and put in their information there. Then they had to have their plan for protection and what the cost was going to be. And then they had to think through investment risks, because that's in the next phase, but they need to be thinking about that because they know there's risks. Whenever you invest, it's not always easy. There's loss, and how do you minimize the loss and how do you reduce the risk? And they had to come up with a plan for that. Then the final one was their budget. They had their total net wage of everybody in the group that they had to work with. They had to come up with their categories and their expenses, which ones fit in those categories, their expense amount, and have that ready to go. So again, my job was to ask them about things and help them think of things that they had forgotten that weren't being included in their budget. Then as part of that, I set it up so they had about 30 days in class, which equates to 30 months of budgets, and so they would need to they could accrue money through their budget, and then that's what they would spend in the next phase. So they needed a budgeting tool, so they had to come up with at least 3 budgeting tools and list the pros and cons, and I had them be digital tools because with today's technology it just makes it easier for them to be more successful in budgeting if they have a tool that helps them track their spending more. And then they use this tool for their budgeting through those 30 days. Every day they would come in and adjust their budget with their new amounts and any passive income they may have. They were going to use that tool throughout the rest of the semester. And that is, again, we had a panel. And this panel went through each of these things. The kids explained the place to live and all the things that they had figured out. And the panel decided if they were indeed living financially fit and living on less than what they were earning, and knew enough to really be prepared to go put their money to work. It was a great experience, a lot of creativity and fun, but just wait, the next phase is even better.